Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the three most deadly sins in communication. They're trivial, naive, simple, very easy to avoid, but still people make them over and over again every day, and that's exactly the reason I decided to talk about it. I will start with a story going back to the days when I was busily finishing my Ph.D. thesis. My scientific advisor, who also was my boss, was an extremely bright and extremely knowledgeable person, but he was also straightforward, couldn't tolerate fools, and was quite sarcastic, bordering on acidic. He imprinted many of these qualities on me, so it's all his fault. Anyway, when he discovered an issue, an error in my reasoning or in the formulas I wrote, he picked up the phone immediately, he called me and asked one and the same question. Have you got a mirror nearby? Okay, go and take a look at a moron. Well, I know these were the days when political correctness was not on anyone's radar, so it was okay. I waited for my moment for quite some time. Finally, I find an error in his text. I immediately called him on the phone and asked, okay, have you got a mirror nearby? His reply, you've grown up. I wish I could say the same about quite a number of people sending me emails, including, regrettably, a few from Logos IT. I'm boiling inside. I'm willing to ask them to go and find a mirror, but obviously today it's absolutely out of question. Anyway, let's talk about those three deadly communication sins. Sin number one, not changing the message subject when replying to an email. This becomes especially contagious when the subject matter is something like a big delay or a screw-up, an error, or part of the project cancelled or something like that. Obviously, when something happens, everybody tries to resolve it, but after a certain period of time, you can assume that the issue is resolved, but many people continue replying to the same thread. Probably it's easier for weeks or even months after the event, when everybody should have forgotten about it. Well, first of all, negativity is generally not welcome in business communication. You're just reminding all your employees, or maybe even worse, client representatives, that there was a screw-up in the past. It's well behind us, but we need to remind you about it a couple months later. So that's the first reason not to do it. But second, when they're scrolling through our mailboxes, we look at the subjects, we look at the titles. We do not even know what it's all about. And if the subject is contagious, acidic, and irrelevant, first of all, it adds negative emotions. Second, one might not even understand what it's all about because the actual subject is quite different and you are writing about a totally different matter 2 months after the event happened. How to avoid it? Simple. Think before replying. If the message subject you're replying to is outdated, obsolete, and irrelevant, either start a new message or change the subject before sending. Very simple, but you cannot imagine how many people are actually guilty of this sin. Sin number two, not checking the list of recipients before replying to an email, reply to all, or sending a new mail where you're including a lot of aliases. Very often, either you include people who shouldn't be there by any means and who shouldn't receive this message at all, especially if there is something sensitive inside, or you're simply spamming people who have nothing to do with the subject matter or with the project or whatever, and you are just spending or wasting their time because they have to go through all of this. Examples. Well, first of all, just maybe several weeks ago, we were communicating with a client and conveying the new bank account credentials where we wanted them to pay starting immediately. Imagine my surprise when in their reply, including all the confirmations and everything, I saw an email alias from one of our competitors who was inadvertently receiving all of this, which was, well, at least it felt awkward. Second, once replying to a work email where there was a slight delay in the project, but nothing dramatic, our group manager included not just the people at the top who needed to be involved, but the whole group alias. It turned out that this alias included the person whose fault was exactly the reason for this delay and whose erratic behavior resulted in us being in the middle of parting way with this employer. Well, this employer has received an email explaining how we screwed up and whatever, and they didn't hold off, replied with a shitload of dirt poured all over the team that shouldn't have happened if this group manager sent the email only to the people who should have received it. Well, the third example, you're simply spamming people, and the worst case of it is when somebody receives an email, the person who really needs to reply, and they also reply to all. And that way it multiplies and the amount of spam in your inbox goes beyond any reasonable limits. How to avoid it? Very simple. Think before replying or sending. Double check the list of recipients and try to avoid replying to all under most circumstances. It never does anyone any good because the actual number of people who are expected to receive this communication is typically much smaller. That's it. Very simple. Sin number 3. Not taking a calming break before sending something very important, especially when it deals with various screw-ups, errors, delays, or emotionally involved issues. Typically, the most important thing to do when you're writing an important email that could very well define the fate of the project or the developments after it is to make sure that it's very well structured, very logical, and very businesslike. But when you're writing it in the heat of the moment, your emotions tend to seep in. And there is the biggest mistake when you are just not writing it in this particularly emotional stage, but when you are sending it immediately just to get rid of it. I understand it from a psychological viewpoint, but that's the worst moment. Because, first of all, it could be emotionally overcharged, and it will not actually relieve the pressure. It will only add tension to the matter. Second, when you are sending it too quickly without enough time to think or even rethink certain issues, you may lose some important arguments, some very valid points, and the whole structure may be far from perfect, which is definitely not the result you want to achieve. An extreme example of this sin is one of my former colleagues who tended to read just the first several sentences of each email and replied immediately while emotions were running high and definitely overwhelming him. So first he was replying, typically it lacked the full structure, some logical pieces were missing, and it was very emotional. Then, after 10 to 15 minutes, he tended to have second thoughts, and he was replying to his own message sent earlier, obviously replying to all, adding those pieces that have come to mind during those 10 to 15 minutes. And in 10 to 15 minutes more, he would repeat the whole thing, Sometimes it could reach up to 3 replies to all. I cannot even convey to you how confusing, awkward, and misleading this all felt. The best recipe, when writing something like this, that is a very important message when tensions run high, prepare the draft, save it, and leave it for at least several hours, or even sleep over it. You cannot imagine how many additional thoughts on improving it, making it better structured, removing emotions, and providing additional logical pieces come to mind during those first several hours when you're taking a break, you're concentrating on something else. All of this happens in the background, but suddenly after several hours or in the morning, you get a great idea of how to improve it and actually make sure that it relieves the pressure and, I would say, improves the situation rather than bringing the tensions to a new high level. I personally always follow this advice. I never send very important emails without leaving them for at least several hours to make sure that my thoughts are collected in the background and I send a much better structured, much more business-oriented, considerably more logical and less emotional text as a result. To summarize, there is a universal, very simple solution how to avoid all those 3 deadly communication sins. Think a little before replying, sending a message, or finalizing it. That's it. Thinking is good for you in general, and that way you will avoid quite a number of awkward situations, avoid sending numerous apologies, avoid problems or tensions running high. And if you absolutely cannot do that, maybe it's time to go looking for a mirror. Have a great day, everyone.